There comes a moment in every soul's journey when the darkness does not simply surround, it conspires. When voices rise not to guide, but to silence. When the world, in all its loud forgetfulness, tries to write you out of the story you were born to tell. But in that moment, heaven speaks a word that outlasts every attempt of erasure. They tried to erase you, but I wrote you in fire. The strange truth about divine purpose is that it is rarely written in ink. Ink fades. Ink can be washed away by the rains of opposition or the tears of disappointment. Fire, however, fire engraves. Fire sears truth into the eternal fabric of being. It marks what cannot be erased. God does not merely record your name on a fragile page. He inscribes it upon the flame of his own spirit, upon the everlasting memory of heaven. You were not written in dust. You were written in divine fire, the kind that no storm can extinguish. The world often mistakes obscurity for insignificance. It believes that if you are unseen, you are undone. Yet God's work often begins in the silence, where no one applauds, in the soil where no one notices. What men call obscurity, heaven calls preparation. What they tried to bury, God was secretly planting. For the seed that lies hidden beneath the earth is not erased. It is merely waiting for firelight to call it upward. Those who tried to erase you thought they were powerful enough to rewrite what God himself declared. They thought that by silencing your name, they could silence your purpose. But eternity has no eraser for what God has written in flame. When heaven marks you, no human hand can unmark you. Every attempt to diminish you becomes, in the divine paradox, the very pressure that reveals your permanence. For gold does not prove itself in ease. It proves itself in fire. And this is the mystery of your endurance. Every injustice, every betrayal, every moment you were misunderstood or discarded was not wasted. It was shaping something eternal within you, engraving depth into your soul where the light of mere comfort could never reach. The hands that tried to break you only strengthened the seal God placed upon you. The voices that mocked you only made heaven's proclamation louder. Because when God writes in fire, he writes to be seen through the dark. Perhaps you have looked at your life and wondered if the pages were torn, if your story had been rewritten by the cruelty of time or the mistakes of others. But no, God's authorship is not fragile. It is not subject to revision by human hands. The fire he used to write your destiny is the same fire that guards it. Even when you have lost your way, even when you doubted your worth, the letters still burn, untouched and unwavering, deep within the script of your soul. There is a holy defiance in the way God preserves what belongs to him. He does not argue with your enemies, he simply outlasts them. He does not rush to prove your worth, he refines it until even the ashes bear witness. What they meant for disappearance, he transforms into evidence. And soon, those who once said, "You were forgotten," will see the very light they tried to extinguish rising from the embers, brighter than before. So do not mourn what was taken, nor fear what was forgotten. The hand that writes in fire cannot be stopped by the coldness of men. Every wound that sought to erase you has become part of the inscription. Proof that you were marked by something greater than this world, and when heaven looks upon you, it does not see a casualty of circumstance, but a living flame, testifying that divine purpose does not die in darkness. You are not erased. You are eternal writing in motion. Fire walking among the ashes, proof that the author of your life does not make drafts. Every trial that threatened to erase you has only deepened the glow of your meaning. For you were written in the language of eternity, and eternity forgets no one. And when the day comes that all false words fall away, When every counterfeit story fades into silence, the fire will still speak your name. It will whisper the same truth that has burned through every storm and shadow. They tried to erase you, but I wrote you in fire. When God speaks a name, he does not whisper it into sand, where tides can wash it away. He engraves it upon the eternal foundations of his purpose. Your existence is not an accident of flesh or chance. It is the expression of a deliberate word that left the mouth of the Creator before time began. The human world trades in labels and forgets them easily, but heaven writes identity in a language of permanence. That is why storms cannot rewrite who you are, and betrayal cannot unmake what was formed in divine thought. You were not written in pencil to be corrected. You were carved in eternity to be revealed. The tragedy of many lives lies in forgetting that truth. People often allow the judgments of others to become chisels against their worth. They begin to believe that rejection is evidence of insignificance, that silence from the world is silence from God. But divine identity does not waver with applause or vanish with criticism. It was never dependent on human recognition to exist. Before a single voice spoke your name, heaven had already sung it into being. You were known before you were seen. When the enemy seeks to erase you, he does not begin with your circumstances. He begins with your memory. He tries to convince you that what God said about you was conditional, fragile, revocable. He whispers that your failures have rewritten your name, that your story has been smudged by disappointment. But fire does not smudge. Fire seals. What God wrote in flame cannot be undone by the ashes of your mistakes. Every time you rise again from what tried to consume you, you prove that your identity is stronger than destruction itself. Think of how easily humans forget. They rewrite history, rename streets, remove monuments, and pretend certain stories never existed. Yet there are things that cannot be deleted because they are not written in history, but in essence. Light does not need memory to exist. It simply burns. So it is with the soul that knows its maker. Divine identity does not depend on who remembers you, but on who created you. It is not recorded in the fragile ink of human approval, but in the fire of divine authorship. That is why, when everything else is stripped away, something within you still burns with awareness. You know, without being told, that you were meant for more than this moment. When God engraves, he does not use gentle strokes. The engraving comes through experience, through seasons that cut deep into the spirit. Each trial that seemed to diminish you was carving depth into your being. The pain you endured was not the erasure of your identity, but the shaping of its clarity. The fire that surrounded you was the same element that sealed you. You did not lose yourself there. You were being revealed there. For only fire can expose what is real, and only engraving can resist the erosion of time. The world measures identity by changeable things. Titles, possessions, admiration, youth. But heaven measures by what endures when all else burns away. A divine identity is not an external mark. It is an inner inscription that survives obscurity, rejection, and loss. You could be stripped of every visible success and still remain fully who God declared you to be. No failure can alter the handwriting of heaven. The soul that was touched by divine fire remains luminous, even when hidden beneath ashes. In the silence of your private battles, when no one sees your persistence, that is when the engraving is deepest. God does not write identity in the noise of crowds. He writes it in the stillness of surrender. When you have been emptied of every illusion of control, when you stand before him with nothing but your need, that is when he reminds you. Your worth was never built on what you achieved, but on what he spoke. To be engraved by God is to carry an unshakable mark that no failure can erase. There is a fierce beauty in knowing that your name is written where human hands cannot reach. The world can ignore you, misjudge you, even deny you, but it cannot delete what heaven inscribed. The more they try to silence your voice, the more the fire burns beneath the surface, ready to speak in its own time. Every scar becomes a letter in the script of divine authorship, proof that you were formed by something unbreakable. You are not the sum of what they see. You are the echo of what he declared. This is why identity forged by God cannot be lost. It can only be forgotten temporarily by the one who carries it. The rediscovery of divine identity is not the gaining of something new, but the remembering of something ancient. You are tracing back to the fire where your story began, to the moment when the eternal author wrote you not as a fragile idea, but as a blazing certainty. You are not erased, and you never were. What was engraved in you by divine fire remains untouched, waiting for you to see it again through the smoke of every trial. When God chooses to mark something, he does not use the fragile tools of men. He does not depend on ink that fades or on words that can be crossed out by time. He writes in fire, holy, consuming, eternal. That fire is not a symbol of destruction, but of preservation. It burns away what is false, so that what is real might remain forever. When heaven marks a life, the mark is not visible to human eyes, yet it carries a weight that reshapes destiny. It cannot be undone by envy, erased by failure, or silenced by forgetfulness. What God seals in fire stands untouched by decay. Human recognition is temporary, and human memory is brief. People can celebrate you one moment and doubt you the next. They can rewrite their opinion of you as easily as turning a page. But the permanence of God's fire is beyond that reach. It is not a mark made by admiration, but by divine intention. He writes not to impress, but to affirm, not to decorate, but to define. When his fire touches your life, it leaves something indelible, a truth about who you are, and what you are called to that cannot be diluted by circumstance. Fire has always been heaven's language of covenant. It descended on altars, wrapped around prophets, and filled upper rooms. It does not merely appear, it claims. When God's fire marks you, it claims you for a purpose beyond comfort, beyond recognition. It becomes the quiet proof that you belong to something larger than yourself. Others may not understand it. They may only see the heat, the struggle, the refinement. But within that fire, something eternal is being etched, a mark that no hand can undo and no shadow can conceal. You may feel at times that the fire has burned too long, that it has taken from you more than it has given. But in the unseen depth of your being, it is shaping permanence. What is of heaven cannot remain temporary. The fire burns through what is mortal, so that what is divine may be revealed. That is why certain seasons feel unrelenting, because heaven is engraving endurance where fragility once lived. What is left after the fire is not ruin, but revelation. You become something that lasts. There is a quiet paradox in how God marks his own. The mark is invisible to those who live only by sight, yet it is unmistakable in its effect. It radiates through how you endure, how you forgive, how you rise again after everything has fallen. The permanence of his fire is seen in the way you keep glowing long after the world expects you to dim. They may ask how you are still standing, not realizing that you are no longer standing in your strength, but in the residue of divine flame. When the Creator writes in fire, he does not consult the fragile opinions of those around you. He does not ask permission to bless, to call, or to choose. He decides, and the decision becomes eternal. Even your own doubts cannot unmark you. The fire within may flicker, but it never dies. It burns quietly through the disappointments, through the years of silence, through the seasons when nothing seems to move. It remains, whispering that God's word over your life has not changed. This permanence is not a comfort for the proud, but a refuge for the faithful. It reminds you that divine calling is not subject to human revision. You cannot be written out of what God Himself has written in flame. The world may close doors, but the mark of fire opens unseen paths. It turns every rejection into redirection, every delay into a deeper engraving of purpose. When the world tries to define you by what you have lost, the fire defines you by what cannot be taken. The permanence of God's fire is also His protection. What is sealed by flame is guarded by the one who lit it. That is why some things that were meant to destroy you only revealed the mark more clearly. The same fire that wrote your identity stands watch over it. You do not need to defend what God has already sealed. You need only to walk as one who knows they are marked by something eternal. Even in the unseen, heaven recognizes its own handiwork. You are not fragile parchment waiting to be rewritten by the world's mistakes. You are a living testimony of divine engraving. The fire that marked you is still burning, silent but certain. It does not fade with time or dim with age. It endures, untouched by the erosion of years, carrying within it the same brilliance it held the moment God spoke your name into being. Every soul called toward divine purpose will eventually encounter resistance, for opposition is not proof of abandonment, but evidence of value. What God ordains, the world often misunderstands. What heaven sets apart, the earth tends to resist. But in that resistance, something sacred occurs. Opposition becomes the furnace where character is purified, where motives are tested, where destiny takes on its true form. Without fire, gold remains hidden ore. Without pressure, the diamond stays unseen. So it is with destiny. It is the friction that reveals its brilliance. When you face opposition, you are not being diminished, you are being refined. Every challenge removes something unnecessary: fear, pride, dependence on approval, until only what is essential to your purpose remains. God allows adversity not to weaken the chosen, but to strengthen their foundation. He permits resistance not as punishment, but as preparation. The very thing that seems to block your way is the tool shaping your endurance. Without resistance, there would be no resilience. Without testing, no testimony. The soul that never meets opposition never learns the depth of its own roots. Ease can make faith shallow, but hardship drives it deep. In opposition, you discover the unshakable center of who you are. When all familiar supports are stripped away, when nothing around you agrees with your calling, that is when you finally anchor yourself in what cannot be taken. The voice of destiny becomes clearer in the noise of conflict because you learn to hear it not through comfort, but through conviction. Those who tried to oppose you thought they could stop your progress, but they only clarified your purpose. What they meant to destroy became the mirror through which you saw your strength. It is in contradiction that truth stands out. The world's resistance is not a verdict on your worth, but a confirmation of it. If you were insignificant, there would be no need to silence you. The fact that you have faced resistance means you carry something that threatens the darkness. The enemy does not attack what is empty, he attacks what is destined to shine. Opposition is often the unseen teacher of destiny. It forces you to refine your intentions. It asks, do you believe in your calling only when it is easy? Or do you believe in it when everything is against you? It teaches you to fight not for recognition, but for alignment with what is eternal. Through opposition, God trains the soul in divine patience, the kind that holds fast even when results seem delayed. The waiting, the resistance, the misunderstanding, all of it chisels you into someone who can carry greatness without breaking under its weight. When gold is placed in fire, it does not argue with the flame. It simply endures until it glows. The process is painful, but it reveals purity. So too, the one who endures opposition begins to radiate a different kind of strength. The kind that cannot be counterfeited. You begin to walk with quiet authority, not born from pride but from survival. You stop seeking validation and start recognizing purpose. You understand that your trials were never random. They were orchestrated by a wise hand that knew what kind of pressure would bring forth your truest form. It is easy to despise the seasons of opposition, but those are the very chapters heaven uses to write endurance into your spirit. They teach you what favor alone cannot teach. Favor shows you opportunity. Opposition teaches you ownership. It makes you claim your purpose, not because it is convenient, but because it is yours. It strips away the illusion that destiny is handed easily. True calling is proven in struggle. Every wound, every delay, every rejection becomes part of the refining process that prepares you to walk in what you were promised. When others misunderstand you, when they question your motives or dismiss your worth, do not rush to defend yourself. The refining fire does not need an audience. Those who doubt you are not your judges. They are instruments sharpening you. Every false word spoken against you becomes fuel for the refining flame. God allows their voices to echo not to discourage you, but to deepen your discernment. You begin to distinguish between who you are and what others think you are. That clarity is priceless, for destiny cannot be fulfilled by someone still seeking to please the crowd. The moments when you thought opposition would end, you were the very moments it was anchoring you. What looked like resistance was divine craftsmanship. God does not build on weak foundations, and opposition exposes where strength must grow. The enemy tries to define you by your scars, but heaven sees them as evidence of survival. You were not defeated, you were forged. You emerged from the pressure, not as a victim, but as refined gold, marked by endurance, carrying the shine of one who has passed through fire and still stands. There are times in life when God conceals rather than reveals, when doors remain closed and silence seems endless. It is not rejection, it is refinement. The hidden season is not the absence of purpose, but the shaping of it. Just as seeds are buried before they bloom, every destiny must first endure the quiet soil of obscurity. In that stillness, heaven is working in ways unseen, forming strength where eyes cannot look and roots where applause cannot reach. The hidden place is sacred, because it is where foundations are laid. Foundations too deep to be shaken by what comes later. People often confuse visibility with value. They measure worth by who is seen, who is celebrated, who is heard. But God's method is opposite to the world's rhythm. Before he displays a life, he hides it. Before he entrusts a voice, he silences it. Before he releases influence, he cultivates integrity. What you call delay, heaven calls preparation. What feels like isolation is often insulation. God keeping you covered until the structure of your spirit can hold what he intends to pour into it. In hidden seasons, your name is not known, but your character is being written. The applause of men is absent, but the attention of heaven is fixed on you. You are not being ignored, you are being instructed. God teaches differently in the dark. He speaks in whispers that only the waiting heart can hear. He uses stillness to sharpen your discernment, to strip you of dependence on validation, to build endurance that no stage can provide. The silence is not punishment, it is protection. The unseen work is the truest work, for what is not rooted in the hidden place will not stand in the open field. The seed buried in the ground does not question the soil. It does not demand to be seen. It surrenders to the darkness because it knows growth begins beneath the surface. Likewise, your hidden season requires surrender, the willingness to let God work in ways that others cannot witness. When nothing seems to move, something deep is taking shape. The pressure, the loneliness, the uncertainty, they are all part of the divine process that forms authenticity. God is not rushing because he is not building something temporary. He is crafting something that will endure storms and outlast seasons. Hidden seasons are where dependence is purified. When no one applauds, you learn to walk without needing it. When no one affirms, you learn to trust the still small voice. God removes every false support until your foundation is built only on him. It is in obscurity that the heart learns worship without reward, faith without proof, and obedience without audience. This is not wasted time, it is the construction of depth. Destiny without depth collapses under weight, and so God hides you until you can carry what he has prepared. Every great calling has a hidden beginning. David's anointing was real long before his crown was visible. Moses was called long before the Red Sea split. Even Christ himself lived 30 quiet years before his public ministry began. The pattern of heaven never changes. What is hidden is not forgotten. God's timing is not delayed, it is deliberate. The waiting season is not passive. It is full of motion unseen to the human eye, like the heartbeat beneath the earth before spring. You are being prepared for a visibility that will not destroy you, for a responsibility that requires more than enthusiasm. The hidden place is also where intimacy with God grows strongest. When distractions fade and noise is silenced, you begin to hear him clearly. You realize that the delay was not distance, it was drawing. The solitude becomes sanctuary. Every unanswered prayer, every closed door, every detour becomes a message written in patience. God is teaching you to see beyond outcomes, to trust his pace, to rest in the unseen design. When you emerge, you do not emerge as you entered. You come out with understanding, humility, and strength that cannot be faked. There is a tenderness in how God handles the hidden ones. He keeps them covered not because they are unworthy, but because they are precious. Exposure too early can ruin what is still maturing. The world might call it stagnation, but heaven calls it stewardship. The delay is mercy, the waiting is grace disguised as stillness. In the unseen, God protects you from the weight of premature success, from the gaze of those not ready to understand your calling, from battles you are not yet equipped to fight. The hidden season asks for faith without evidence. It demands trust in a process you cannot fully see. It is a quiet covenant between you and God. He will prepare you in silence, and you will trust that silence is love, not neglect. The longer the seed stays buried, the stronger its roots will be when it breaks through. Hiddenness is not loss, it is investment. The same hand that buried you will, in time, raise you, but only when the roots are deep enough to hold the weight of fruit. Every attempt to suppress truth only strengthens its power to be heard. When others try to quiet your voice, they forget that what God ordains cannot be muted. Silence is not defeat, it is transformation. It is the sacred moment when pain begins to echo with divine meaning. What was meant to silence you becomes the very story that heaven uses to speak through you. Every wound, every rejection, every unspoken word becomes part of a testimony too powerful to be denied. You were not silenced. You were being prepared to speak with authority that only suffering can give. Those who tried to break your voice did not understand that God speaks most clearly through those who have been broken. The world silences what it fears, and darkness always fears light. When your words carried truth, they provoked resistance. When your life began to reflect grace, opposition followed. Yet the silence that followed was not empty. It was sacred incubation. God often allows the noise around you to fade, so his voice within you can grow stronger. You thought you had lost your sound, but heaven was tuning it. Silence can feel like burial. It can feel like you have been forgotten, erased, or replaced. But every seed that will rise must first endure the quiet of soil. The same silence that hides you is the silence that forms you. The tears that never found words are written in heaven's record as prayers. The disappointments you never voiced are being shaped into wisdom. And when the time comes, what once felt like the end will emerge as the beginning of your testimony. The silence will speak louder than any cry could have. God never wastes pain. The moments meant to break you become the very proof that you cannot be broken. Every betrayal becomes a sentence in your story of endurance. Every loss becomes the punctuation that gives your message power. The testimony born from silence carries an authority that words alone cannot hold. People listen differently to those who have survived what they speak of. When you tell your story, it is not theory. It is truth refined by fire. And that truth pierces hearts because it carries the sound of survival. Those who tried to silence you believed that if they controlled your voice, they could control your destiny. But destiny is not built on volume. It is built on fire. You can quiet a person, but you cannot quiet the flame God lit inside them. Even in silence, purpose keeps burning. Even when you say nothing, your endurance speaks. Every time you rise from what tried to bury you, heaven declares through your life that no voice ordained by God can be permanently muted. The testimony is not in the noise you make, but in the fact that you are still here, still standing, still believing. There is a mysterious beauty in divine reversal. The very moments meant to destroy you become the instruments of your redemption. The silence forced upon you becomes the soil of wisdom, the womb of revelation. You begin to understand that you were never meant to fight for recognition. You were meant to carry truth so pure that it speaks for itself. When God turns silence into testimony, he transforms your scars into sermons, your weakness into witness. You become a living story of resurrection. Proof that light cannot be buried beneath darkness for long. When you finally speak again, your voice carries weight that it never had before. It no longer needs to convince, it simply reveals. The pauses, the struggles, the hidden tears, they give depth to your words. People sense something unexplainable in you, something earned in quiet warfare. That is the power of divine testimony. It does not glorify the pain, but the purpose that rose from it. What you went through is no longer your shame. It becomes your platform. What silenced you becomes the reason others listen. Your testimony is not just about survival. It is about transformation. You did not emerge the same as you entered. The silence did not take your strength. It refined it. You learned the language of endurance, the tone of patience, the rhythm of faith. You discovered that even when your voice was taken, your presence still spoke. The power of a life sustained by grace is louder than any spoken defense. You became evidence that God does not remove storms. He teaches his children to stand in their midst without losing their song. When others hear your story, they will see more than what you endured. They will see who you became because of it. They will recognize that silence was not the end, but the crucible of something eternal. The fire that was meant to consume your words only purified your message. Now every scar testifies not to defeat, but to divine authorship. The voice that was once silenced now carries heaven's tone, measured, patient, fearless, and full of light.